Almost forgot the mic, Bruce.
Hey,
almost forgot the mic. How you doing this morning?
Hey, I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's warming up over here, and I'm ready for some good drum technique talk today, or things we're going to jump into. How you doing over there? What do you think you got on tap for today?
Today, we were going to present just some building blocks I use for phrasing, and that's a pretty broad, let's say, street to travel in, because there's several resources I use, and highlighting certain things today will be trying to, what I'll try to do.
Sure.
Hey, Bruce, there's Mary Tuggle. Hi, Mary.
We're going to throw up our friends as we're talking.
And so, I was just thinking about, like, where do you begin with, like, building phrasing? Well, most of the people I deal with through many years, there's always this disconnect between, playing time and doing a fill, where they feel like suddenly they've hit the, they've flown off the canyon and they're flying in air. They're not sure they're going to make it to the other side.
Right. Exactly.
And, so that can be a timing issue. I always talk about getting to the bottom of the time and being inclusive of having your foot there to help stabilize your time. Absolutely a necessity. Hey, Vihar. And, that's one issue. But the general context of what I wanted to bring up in terms of phrasing is having good command over your rhythmic values, I'm always thinking of phrasing a little bit more from the standpoint of an improviser. So, in terms of conversation, you want to have good sentence structure and a good vocabulary and try.
So often everybody always thinks of improvisation as like just jazz, but it's not, right? I mean,
no, it's not. There's a bunch of great drummers, like rock and roll drummers, that just,
right?
can just burn. I mean, look at Glenn Sobel. I mean, he's with Alice Cooper, but he's an extremely gifted improviser as well. Right. And, in that rock and roll vein, you might say stylistically, there might be a little bit of a different tinge in terms of like, well, am I using the double kick? Am I hitting a little harder? Those are all, just choices of the landscape of music. But there's, inside the idea of time, there's always an element of having some freedom to move it around a little bit, to be, let's say, in the moment, to punctuate with a soloist, even if it's like just a straight up rock and roll tune. You don't have to just sit steadfast and just keep the time and hold on for dear life. You want to keep some conversation going.
I mean, and sometimes it doesn't have to be a live improvise. It could be something you're using just to build on a project too, right? I mean, so that's the other thing. These tools can be used not just in a live setting.
No. Just in terms of just getting also to develop an access of your fluidity of what you want to do, that flow.
That's
so getting into, the stream of consciousness mode, whereby you're using a lot of the tools that you've been working on. I mean, we all work on paradiddles, and there's flam taps and there's flam accents. And, thinking on in terms of like applying those to the drum set, I never really thought in that from that standpoint of like, hey, I'm going to play a flam tap and it's going to work like this, or I'm going to play a whatever, even a paradiddle. I mean, I did, because there are constructs of the paradiddle that allow you to, split it between your cymbal and your snare drum, your hi-hat and your snare drum, and you've got an instant funky pattern. But in terms of voicings, I love the Gary Chafee Sticking Patterns book because of his sort of removal of any relationship to rudiment, so to speak. He's got these stickings that he lays out. He's got a very cool definition to how they run, the 5 definitions that he puts forward. And giving you some context of putting it into quintuplets and septuplets. And I know that in our, greater usage of that is not going to be a big part of something that you're doing, especially in a rock and pop kind of a setting. It's not often that you're going to be going do bap do bap do a 5, a quintuplet, unless there's some kind of musical, madness behind it, like, I don't know, like a Dream Theater or a Tool, or I don't know, Periphery, those more exploratory math rock kind of groups.
Yep.
So,
all right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. We're going to get started. I just want to always remind people, you can lurk, or you can feel free to drop in your questions anytime. I'll work to get those in, of course, and at a break. But if you drop those questions, maybe put a cue in front of them just to give me a heads up. But either way, I'll get to them. And I guess with that, I'm going to give you the floor, Bruce. And if you need me, you know where I am.
I will. Exactly. You'll be hiding behind the microphone.
Exactly.
So yeah, as I was talking, like the Gary Chafee book, such a great book. That's one lane of what I would use to build a greater, let's say, 6-lane highway, so to speak. There's some highlights that I would use from that book to kind of build upon a greater flexibility with your stickings. And again, what I like about what Gary does is he puts it into context whereby you're able to, kind of reposition things in a unique way that maybe you haven't thought about. And whether that literally translates into your playing is not really the punchline. The punchline would be more about you conceptually bringing it in to build some flexibility in what you can do. So that's one. Another building block for phrasing would be, what I call rhythmic concepts. What does that mean? Well, in a more simplistic version, Ted Reed syncopation has some of that in those dedicated syncopated pages from 34 to 45, whereby the general layout is to swing those notes. So in other words, if I did number 1 on page 34, it's really 1 and 2 and 3, 4, if we were playing it straight. But as a swinging component, it would be 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. So when I think of those kind of phrases, and you get into the spirit of understanding how they work, now when you get to pages 38 through 45, he just amasses, like a sort of a composition of those rhythms. And I always say, get to the sing-songiness of that. So what do I mean? I'm just going to, sing some phrases and be somewhat random, but try to keep some semblance of order. And I would be thinking, a 1, 2, 3, 4, boo-da, ba, ba-doo, ba-dee, ba, ba, ba-doo-da, ba, ba, ba-doo, ba, do-da, ba-doo-da, ba-doo, ba-dee-da, da, boo-da, do-dee, boo, boo-boo-doo, ba, boom. You're just thinking like, okay, can I kind of dance around with those rhythms? Well, when you kind of inch up the ladder with a little bit more information, for example, the follow-up book to that could be Louis Bellson's Modern Reading Text in 4/4, because he does a similar thing with those eighth note, quarter note values. And I'm just going to assume, because it was Louis Bellson, that the essence would have been put forward to swing those. And he puts them into combinations with some 16th notes, and later on some broken up eighth note triplets and quarter note triplet values, so that you really start to get into even more of that landscape of the sing-songiness. So, like you were doing some 16th notes, you'd want to be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, zit-up, ba-did-it, ba-dib-ba-did, da-ba-dib-ba-did-up, bop, bop, ba-dee-dat, do-ba-dib-ba-dat, dib-ba-dib-up, ba-did-it, dot. Okay, so I was trying to throw some E's and Ahs in there, and commanding that post of the quarter note, so that when you're thinking about those phrasings. Now, that also works for your general time. If you're playing time and you're struggling to get E's and Ahs out on the bass drum, or E's and Ahs out on the snare drum, where they really sit syncopated to your quarter note pulse, you want to be able to work through those. And, the whole thing about drumming is just, you got to get down and dirty and just do the work. That's all there is to it. There's nothing to it but to do it. Doing nothing provides nothing. No result comes forward. And so if you can chip away and really sit in a lane of being responsible to, several different lanes, it's like you're juggling plates, so to speak. You're thinking about, I got to work on my bass drum foot. Oh, I got to work on my hands. Oh, I got to work on my timekeeping skills, and think about some creative outlets to build up a little bit more vocabulary and headroom. Hey, that's just how it is. That's the general building block process that you want to go through. Of course, keeping attentive to your hands and your feet in a way that is constructive, that allows you to have the freedom and fluidity, and being mindful of how your anatomy works and all those little, responses is, going to make it work easier. But it still doesn't, leave you from the responsibility of getting in and digging in a little deeper. So that Louis Bellson book, what a great book. Just fantastic for that. Another couple things that I would provide, for that is because of the nature of the drum set and the history of coming from the swing era, and how that, you know, the tap dance rage and all that in the, you know, the 20s and 30s and 40s and, you know, onward. And again, I'll point out Steve Gadd, a tap dancer, Buddy Rich, a tap dancer. So understanding that value and the rhythmic components that are involved in that medium versus drums, it's very similar. And so there's a whole range of that upstroke, downstroke stuff that I do to provide a more, let's say, fluid element to your stroke. I mean, a stroke is comprised of those elements. You don't want to cut yourself off from the actual upstroke to deliver. There needs to be a nice orbit or choreography that gets you to really pursue a greater value to the stroke and how it works in terms of time. So with the upstroke and downstroke thing, I've gone through this. There's videos of me doing this. I'll just do a quick version of it. I'll take a single paradiddle, I'll do a double paradiddle, and I'll do a triple paradiddle, and I'll just quickly break down. When I do the single paradiddle, I'm going to focus upon just the upstroke value, which would be the second of the paradiddle stroke. So if you have the basic breakdown of a single paradiddle, you have down, up, double, down, up, double, down, up, double, down, up, double. And purposely, I'm trying to keep everything more medium in terms of the dynamic. The double paradiddle, you know, and always these can be superimposed over any rhythmic value. But with the double paradiddle, down, up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, oh, see that? I'm going over the bar line because I'm taking that 3-beat phrase and superimposing it over 4, which we do a lot of in terms of phrasing building. Think about the classic solo on Hotel California at the end. Those are, you know, that's the 16th note run, and they're doing da do do 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 da do ba do do da do da do do da do. Those are 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. If you want to think of them like that, I would default to right away and be going 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and a 2 E and 3. You know, so again, recognizing those kind of little musical values are important. And so understanding the value of 3 and how that works is, you know, really important. So I take that double paradiddle and I throw it over 4/4. In the past, I used to do it in 3/4, and then I went, you know, I got to push this one along. So what does that mean? I always reevaluate things I do, because as I go through the teaching process, I always, you know, maybe my students don't know it, but they're all teachers to me. They give me a lot of things to work with in terms of how they process information. If I find I'm up against a wall, how I'm going to get around that wall or push them over the wall. And that gives me a little bit more of this strategic sensibility to kind of figure out, like, all right, what am I going to do? How does this work? I did this in the past. Let me bring it over here. So that's always sitting in my head firmly. But so I rewrote this, and I put the double paradiddle over 4/4. And then the last one, the triple paradiddle. So let me break them down. I'll just play them. And again, these are just small components of building up phrasing. How you use them, I'll demonstrate a couple ideas that I would think would be valuable. But so here we go. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, up. 1, and 2, and 3, and notice my upstroke, nice and smooth and flowing. And now 2, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Let me stop there just to clarify. On that double paradiddle, I'll play both the down and the upstroke accent. You could do it with just the upstroke accent. There's an exercise I actually do where I take the double paradiddle and push that along to focusing upon the orchestration of the downstroke accent and the upstroke accent, but they never change. They're always moving in that capacity of down and up. It's just which one of you are you pulling. So back to the double paradiddle. I'll hit it right from beat 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 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 3, and bounce and close. I would now be in my left-hand mode. So that would be an 8-bar phrase. And then I would go through that and get the 8-bar phrase to sit comfortably. And so let me take the last bar of that double paradiddle exercise. It would be actually the first bar, because 3-bar our 3-beat phrases would reboot every 3 bars. So if the 1, 2, 3 are the 3 bars that it would reboot on, the 4th bar would bring me back to the top, and that would be the same as bar 1, and that would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm going to give a little bounce to that stroke. I always say that in terms of the technical development of what you want to do, you are the director of the energy. You want to bring forward the element of where that stick goes and extracting the minutest amount of energy that you can produce. In other words, you don't get a lot of rebound from a floor tom because it's lower pitched, and the rebound that you do produce is somewhat erratic. You might get that puff of air from the bottom head blowing back as you're coming down to the head, and it disrupts and blows the stick back a little bit. And you want to maneuver over that like moguls down a ski slope. So you're not worried about, oh, I can only hit the top of the mogul to make a really good turn. You got to hit it in the middle, at the bottom, wherever you are, that's where you are. So that being said, as you're going into these ideas of moving with the energy, you want to be able to bounce and float with the stick. That means you got to get weight out of your forearm. You got to move with the stick, be super sensitized to how that works. So, that's a whole element of what I do in terms of breaking things down to build upon better reflexes and a better understanding to stay light on the feet, to be like a dancer. So anyway, as you're going through that process and you do that bounce on my beat 4 of the double paradiddle, I'm going to bounce, and that's going to bring me to the triple paradiddle. Let's just start with the triple paradiddle just to look at the parameters of what we got in terms of mechanics. I would have a bounce, close, up, and bounce, close, up, and bounce, close, up, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So I want to feel, again, that impact of the stick is activated. So those little maneuverings, as Fred Astaire, that's right, Mary, dancing. And when you are, in the mode of being somewhat reactive or responsive to that, it becomes easy. You're just, again, directing that energy. I call that the inner logic of movement. And so it's not, like some mystical thing. You just got to go through certain calisthenics and some thoughts about it. And really, Vihar here has said, learning the upstroke, downstroke technique for the paradiddles has been magic for me. It absolutely, man, the movement of how you move through your stickings. I'll do my Freddie Gruber. How you do what you do, that's the most important value, because that sets you apart in terms of really being inside, how you can manipulate the stick and get it to flow. So with those, moves, the bounce and the close and all that stuff, you really want to be super sensitized to that. I've seen, lots of videos where somebody says, yeah, you throw down, let the stick bounce like that. Well, that's a good demonstration just to see that the stick has a rebound potential. But you can already build in a better, more focused way of directing that energy, because this stroke back here would require that you have to fight that stick back down. This stroke here will allow me to gently support the stick up, and I'll be able to fall with it and get to the bottom of the stroke or the bottom of the time. And there's an element of receiving that you want to have. So anyway, I don't want to get too technical and too off the topic. But so when I have my 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So what's the point of that? Well, coming in from my double paradiddle, I've got a bounce on beat 4, and that's going to lead me to a bounce on beat 1 to provide the bounce close that I get for my triple paradiddle. So again, those little maneuvers, when you see those things, you can actually start to anticipate or clearly see. Like, for example, there's a book that I use all the time that is just a great plethora of information. There's no stickings. Well, there's maybe a couple in 1 or 2 exercises, but it's called The Contemporary Percussionist. It's on my music stand daily. I use it for my teaching, and I use it for myself to continually just chip away at the etudes to provide better clarity of my doubles on the inside of my hand and better phrasing and all that kind of stuff. And again, while it might rest in a little bit more orchestrated or rudimental style etudes or orchestra style, that's still good for the chop at the end of the day. All that stuff, to me, it's crossbreeding. Everything works. So let me play my double paradiddle. I'll play the full version with a left hand lead. So when I finish out, I'm going to go to my right hand lead of my triple paradiddle. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and bounce, close up and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 back to A, 1 and 1. Touch. When you come down, don't let gravity sucker punch you into an accent. Try to fine tune that touch value so that, again, that's part of like a larger landscape of phrasing is dynamics. You know, you don't want to just club everything out. I mean, you can, and there is an attitude and probably a lane that allows for that. But, you know, to make good sentence structure, it's like if you were talking monotone all day long, you know, people would go like, man, give me some inflection, you know. So you want to try to take that into your sort of your system of how you play and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm teaching unmatched sticking drumming to kids for drum corps. Is there any key point I should consider when it comes to the left hand in this regard? Unmatched. So you're talking about you're teaching traditional grip. Am I correct on that? If you want to follow up with me.
That's what I took from it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, traditional grip has, you know, the same components choreographed wise. It also has the same components of maneuverings to a degree. I mean, it's different. It looks different, but, you know, there are, let's say, I would say similar in terms of building block concepts of what I would lay out in my match grip to my traditional grip to a degree. Yes, it does differ. The problem I find with the traditional grip is that it's very limiting for me. Now, there's a lot of guys who make the case where it's not. And why is it limiting? Because I spent a lot of time really building up a touch and a posture that would sort of emulate where my stick would be in terms of angle playing in traditional grip. And I can get to the bottom of the drum in my match grip. And here I always feel like I'm skating on the top of the drum. And then there's the whole component of ergonomics, getting around the drums. Well, if I can't get to the bottom of the drum really well on my snare drum, I'm not getting to it very well on my toms. So I kind of feel, again, like I'm an ice skater and just skating on the top. However, when I play brushes, it's always in this context because of the position of the brush inside the hand where I can open and close my hand and I get a much better flow. And believe you me, I spent a lot of time trying to play match grip brushes. It just never came out where it felt natural. So you got to go with the path of least resistance. But so regarding that, you know, with your traditional grip, if you're talking about, you know, how you're going to get that to happen, well, let me just raise my pad for a better presentation. I got the same components. If I'm playing that single paradiddle, I've got. There's my upstroke, and it's supported as I come up. I don't want to over-release the stick. A lot of people say, hey, man, get loose, stay loose, man. You got to be loose. Yes, you do. But you also have to have some structure of pressure points and thresholds is what I would say. Thresholds of how much release you have. Yes, I can let my wrist go. And absolutely, I want that, the development of a looser wrist. But I don't want it to interfere with the greater good of being centered with my phrasing and my articulation. You know, you want to get to the center of the time, the center. And boy, I was loose. I've, you know, I remember there's one photo where I'm playing and I'm so loose. And I remember that specific time. It was a drum festival I did in Antwerp, Belgium. And I'm looking at that photo and I go, oh yeah, man. I remember I was always feeling like there was a little bit of like struggle with getting to the center of certain things. Now, was it disastrous? No, but it was like a little fine point that I felt I was missing. And, you know, walking up that ladder of study and practice and introspection kind of put it together. And I went, oh man, okay. Because with Gruber, that's what he provided, a lot of looseness. If you were any other guy than me, practically, I'll say, you know, I don't want to speak for everybody, but in most terms, you came to him for a short period of time, he got you looser, and then you went on your way. I didn't. I stayed for a long time. And we didn't always just stay with the hands thing. We did always have a component of that, but there were a lot of conceptual building blockers that we used. Like, man, going through the Ted Reed, not Ted Reed, I was going to say the Lou Belson book, going through the Even and the Odds book by Ralph Humphrey, which is another great book. Going through the Podemsky book, which is an orchestra snare book. Man, so many things. I got to, look on my shelf and kind of remind myself. I mean, I have pretty good recall, so I could, give you basically a little bit of a description of all those things and how they played into what I do. But my point is that he got me loose, and then I was too loose. And when I started to play more rock and roll style things, which I was already doing, but when I came to my senses, so to speak, and got away from being a jazz snob for a short period of time, I really looked at rock and roll and I went, wow, these guys are burning. Why would I think they were less than? There was just a mentality. I was working with a couple of guys that were like that. And me being somewhat young and impressionable, I went with the flow. Somebody said that sucked. I go, yeah, that sucks, man. And I joined the team, of course. Not a good place to be. Doesn't allow you to push forward and be more clear and set inside yourself the old prophecy of what's the difference if you don't know the difference? Well, if you just go by what somebody else says, you're not going to be able to really find out what that is. So you're, getting in there and digging deep and getting your hands dirty and trying to fine tune that is what is most important. It's required and it's certainly requested. All right. So anyway, back to, this thing, being loose with that upstroke is good, but you need support. So there's a cradling effect in the traditional grip. And while I don't play it, I have all the mechanics of how it would work best. And many of my students can certainly corroborate that and give you a good example of really well-crafted traditional grip. I can see one guy right in my head right now, and that's Steve Hatfield. He's in Wichita. His left hand looks spectacular in the traditional grip position. So anyway, regarding phrasing, let's go forward. Those ups and downs of paradiddles would be certainly an advantage to getting comfortable with kind of working them into some phrasing. So if I was just playing, some like... on and on and on. I don't have like a real good song in my head right now because I'm yakking. But so that element of that upstroke and downstroke is one major component. I've done this before. I did a stick control exercise and some ideas regarding that. And I think that was related to a live stream. Might have been a Facebook thing. I'm sorry, I don't recall that for sure. Whereby I would take let's just say number 9 on page 5 in stick control, and I would play 1, 2, 3, 4, and down, up, again to find the efficiency of that movement, and again coming down to the bottom of the time and being able to produce a nice full-fledged accent on the upstroke. Those are valuable. I love those kind of things. I mean, they come out natural now, so that the contour of your accent structures have more range in what you can do because you're using both sides of the stroke. So another theme that I would go into, so let's say that was my ups and downs. We talked a little bit about like what sticking patterns in Gary Chafee's world has to kind of offer to build up some more melodic and maybe a different slant to how you view stickings. And I did just a while back a stream on sticking patterns by Gary Chafee. So I play with 7A sticks since I was a kid. So playing traditional grip with 5A now has definitely been a challenge. Well, okay, that's, 7As to me are like pencils. Now, depends on what kind of musical style, you're playing. I don't know if I could play a rock gig with a 7A. I don't know if I'd have enough density or wood density, in fact, to get that sound. I mean, I'm sure I could make it work, but I played with SD4s for a long time, and two elements of the SD4. One, they're thinner and lighter. Two, they're made of maple. And so a maple stick for me is a very vibrant stick in contrast to a hickory. Hickory is a little denser, so you don't get as much of that vibration. Although I like the tonality of a maple stick. I stopped once I hit the double glaze 5As from Vic Firth. I moved away from what I was playing before from Firth because the unfinished sticks just didn't sit in my hand well. So yeah, that's a dilemma, but you could walk it up. You could start with an 85A. That's a little thinner than a 5A. That would give you a chance to sort of, one step at a time, building up to maybe finding a 5A. And I'm not saying a 5A is the magic stick for everybody, or a 5B or whatever. You have to make those determinations as to what kind of music you're playing, how you feel in relationship to pushing that weight. I mean, I'm super stickler about like the weight value. I want to have a stick that's about 52 to 53 grams. Gets down to 50 or 49, I feel like I'm playing with balsa wood. And if it's like 56 or 57, feels like a lead pipe. So I become really, uniquely responsive to the weight value. I can play with a little bit heavier. If I was doing a rock gig, I might do that because a little more weight just gives you that feeling of the density and the impact of the stick to the snare drum. So those are considerations. But so, okay, back to finishing my thought. Rudimental stuff or snare drum etudes, so valuable and important to fine tune, like the range of rhythm that you can do. If you're playing certain things, again, you want to have a really good solid ownership of your quarter note pulse. And when you're playing quarter note triplets or half note triplets, in the scheme of things, if you're unsteady and uncertain about that mathematical breakdown, it's going to be chaos. You're going to be, whoa, where's the time? And that's not helpful to anybody. So not to say that all those etudes would have that, but you could bring those forward and grab some, challenges, like whether it's Wilcoxon or the book I'm speaking about, The Contemporary Percussionist by Charles Memphis. Those are all really valuable. In fact, the first 11, I don't know why he started like this, but the first 11 in The Contemporary Percussionist are odd metered etudes, and they switch like maybe every bar or every 2 bars, going from like 7/8 to 5/8 to 6/8 to 3/4 to 4/4 to 9/8. And so at that point, it's all about the subgrouping. You don't need to think about where's one. You need to look at the rhythmic information, because as long as you're there, nobody's going to know. And you're just looking at those, where you are inside the bar, but you're looking at like I said, the rhythmic information of the subgrouping and getting that to sit well. So let's see. Hi, Bruce. And building phrasing ideas. Are you vocally singing the phrases as you play? And are you conscious of what rudiments you're playing? I wouldn't say that I'm so conscious of my rudimental playing. There's things that I've stepped back and I've analyzed. And I'll go, oh, that's a left flam paradiddle. That's something I use all the time. So in terms of like the vocal phrasing, my ability to sing phrasing was something that I nurtured. Like back in the day, Freddie Gruber would have me do that. And so when I was working on like things with the Louis Belson book, like one example would be, and here's a rhythmic concept that I put forward when I've done clinics like years ago. I put these together, and I would make the juxtaposition for somebody between like what I call an interquarter note triplet, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, and 4, 1 and 2, and 4, 1 and 2, and 4. So I'm playing every other eighth note triplet, starting on the middle beat of triplet 1. Which, when jazz, that works as a big theme for me for comping concepts. And 2, and 4. So I would put that together with putting a 16th rest, followed by a dotted eighth note, and then followed by a dotted eighth note with a 16th note. So that would be E2, E4, E2, E4, and 2, and 4, and 2, and 4, E2, E4, E and 2. So what's the point? I want to be able to go in between, feel those subdivisions of the triplets, feel the subdivisions of the 16th notes, and really put that into a place where it's right here, not here. Yeah, you got that support too, and you need this to direct to this. You know, you can't play what you don't hear. And so when you don't hear something, if you practice it enough, you'll hear it. That's what practice is about. So you can learn to hear things better. So going back to the rudimental thing, you know, for me, a lot of things that I play, for example, you know, just in my improv Bruce Becker world, you know, I've gone back and analyzed like, oh, what am I playing there? Well, okay, let's do the analysis of what I said, a left hand leading flam paradiddle. Well, that's so what rhythm is it? Well, in this case, it was 16 notes. It's 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. So what I do with those is I've learned to sort of manipulate them around and perhaps invert it, start it on the E, go into the middle beat of the triplet. You know, when you understand how it works with the triplet, you know, it's going to accent every fourth partial of an eighth note triplet. So, you know, it's the downbeat, the upbeat, and the middle beat. So if I start on the middle beat, then that's going to lead me to the downbeat if I'm in triplets. In other words, if I was coming up from 16th notes and I went, you know, 1E and a 2 and Lee 3 and Lee 4 and Lee 1 and Lee 2 and Lee 3 and Lee 4 and Lee 1E and a 2 and Lee 3 and Lee 4 and a 1E and a 2 and a 3 and Lee 4 and Lee 1 and so on and so on. And it's difficult when I start to sing it because then I get super conscious about where it sits. Now I'm already super bright lighted with that super spotlight. When I play it and I'm just in my head and I know where things are, I can really dictate a little bit more. That's, you know, that's just a personalized phrase. You got to sometimes fine tune your phrases and allow them to, you know, build your confidence and your, what do you want to say, your expressiveness with what you do. You can't worry about always about what that guy's doing. You can take ideas, but then, you know, steal them, right? What did Stravinsky say? A good artist borrows and a great artist steals. You need to bring it in to make it your own thing. So if I try to do something that somebody else does, it's like I'm trying to, like, you know, maybe the guy's like, you know, wearing a 28-inch waist and, you know, size 7.5 shoes, and it ain't going to fit me, man. You know, so I could take it and have it tailored, tailor it to yourself. I practice paradiddles, double paradiddles and triple paradiddles on the snare drum with accents, but somehow struggle to translate them into fills across the kit. Well, you know, again, I'm not always thinking about that in terms of fills. Although I can just share with you, and we still got to work on getting my mic to be able to be utilized on StreamYard because it's not going to work. It'll distort. But if I play the Mitch Mitchell, he's playing. So that's single paradiddles with a downstroke on the first paradiddle, and then the right hand upstroke upstroke of the E, which is the left-hand paradiddle. So right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, 1E and a 2E. And if you hear that phrase and you go, oh yeah, that's Mitch. He did that a lot. You know, there was other things that he put in there. I always say, like, you get a phrase, you need off ramps to be able to segue and go to other areas so that you don't get trapped in a hamster wheel or get trapped in such a way where you go, oh no, how do I get out of here? You know, you don't want to lose your scope of where you're going with what you're doing phrasing wise. So going back to, you know, the rhythmic concepts, those were golden to find out, you know, where an E sits versus where a middle beat of a triplet sits. 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E, E, ut, E, ut, E, ut, E, 1, and Lee 2, and Lee 3, and Lee 4, and Lee 1, E. And you got to do it slow so you can really get into the series of where everything sits. You try to play it too fast, you're just going to derail yourself. There's no point in trying to go, I'm going to play this super fast, and then you fall off the, you know, the track. Slow, so you can really feel. I was talking to one of my students. He said, well, how slow? Can you really play that paradiddle with that large lift? I said, absolutely. as aggravating as that can be to make a nice, slow, methodical orbit to your dance of what you're doing, it's imperative that you do. You'll find greater fluidity when you snap into your normal mode of playing. It brings more, let's say, recognition of what's going on because your tracking mechanism is being really tested. You can't not be, that's a double negative, attentive to what's going on. You have to put a bright spotlight and think through, like, what are you doing? Where are you going with that? And give some, as my good friend would say, you sit here as if you got no place to go and a million years to get there. And you just work it out. Now, that's not easy to get to that headspace and bring it down to zero. There's tons of things that might be nagging on you. I got to do this. I got to go over there. Oh, I'm hungry, or whatever distractions might pop up, because a lot of times when you haven't really worked up, like, let's say, a really good solid level of discipline with your practice, of course, there's going to be little interruptions in your head to go like, oh, that's enough. I think I'll get out of here. And that's when you got to like really build up that muscle to say, no, I'm going to stay here a little bit longer. We got timers on our phones. You can put a timer on. You got a metronome app on your phone. Like, everything has been, let's say, brought to a place where how can you not be successful with that? I'm not saying you're going to be, the most burning drummer by next week at 2 p.m., but you have the technical, what do you want to say, apps and stuff like that to really bring it forward. So you've got everything at your disposal. Remember the old days, we had to buy a metronome, and then, you had a special watch that had a timer. Man, you put your phone on, you got a metronome and a timer. And you can have a nice little soft tone that brings you out of your headspace when you're, not abruptly like some crazy ringing bell, like, oh my God, what is that? So, bringing forward some minutes a day of clarity, absolutely important. And, different things need to be sort of ascertained on a given day. You can have a large list. You build up that list. You look at the list and you go, today is bass drum day, and sit with that for 15 minutes. And always give yourself a chance to go play in the sandbox, right? Like in the old days, like, I don't know, I'm sorry. Let's see. Once you build your blocks to develop your phrasing, how do you apply those phrasing to the music? Could you demonstrate? Well, here, Jeff, I'm going to pod down here. You tell me if my mic is I got to just go in here.
Will do.
If the mic is like distorting or not. So here's my mic. So I'm going to be down lower in the volume, guys. So hang on a second, because I'm going to have to do this manually. So here's that phrase I was talking about with a couple things that will be inserted into this example. First and foremost, Jeffrey.
Yes.
Oh, you know what? Oh, no, it's going to be only here through here. So here. First and foremost, did that distort?
You're good.
Okay, cool. All right. So I'll play some jazz time. I'll play that inner quarter note triplet and maybe a few 16th notes to kind of sit inside the time as I'm playing that. And I'll do that, flam paradiddle thing that I do. So that'll give you a good example. So here we go. That back up. So those are, again, thinking more in the swing vein. There we go. Am I back to normal?
You are.
So those in the swing vein would be, very user-friendly. And so in terms of phrasing concepts, and you want to have a little bit more range in what you do, it's always good to investigate some element of that, because as I said earlier, that's where the drums came from. So, and there's also what I would say a component of rhythms that exist, whether it's thinking about clave or the 6/8 Afro-Cuban rhythm or some of the rhythms in the Brazilian vernacular, that I think everybody should have a little understanding about, that gives you, as I say, the rhythms from the earth. And those are valuable just to have inside your head. If I'm playing, like a triplet bass thing, like in my head, I'm always hearing that. And if I'm going into a 16th note thing, I'm probably hearing sometimes a lot of the rumba clave. So those kind of investigations, I think, are they're fun and they're good and they fatten up what you do. So another component, though, of that idea of phrasing that I would put forward is, again, messing around with what you can do, trying to purposely move it around to different areas or revoice it. The revoicing place is just phenomenal. For example, I've done this before, and I'll pod down again. I'm going to play just a rhythm of inverted paradiddles with accents, and then I'll do the same accent structure, but I'm going to shift and change it and put it to a different voice. So hold on. So here I go. Here is an inverted paradiddle. Oops, I added extra time. I'll take the exact same sticking and I will do the snare drum as the melody. One little thought, and I'll come back. So, as I'm going through and kind of playing, and of course I'm talking too much, so my head to come into play needs to be sort of chilled out. Here we go. Back to normal, Jeff?
Back to normal.
Okay. So, when I play that inverted paradiddle and I explore the different accent potentials, toms are first and foremost. When you reverse it, you've got a couple things that you got to work on. You've got a different sense of melody going on because there's a different interval with the inside notes, with the accent now being focused on the snare drum. And as I learned to do that, it just made more, let's say, more range and motion with what you could do phrasing wise. You could take one thing and just turn it around and do it a completely different way. And it sounds completely different. So what I was just noodling around there at the end was being a little bit more snare drum centric to my accents and kind of filling in on the toms and moving it around. There's some inverted paradiddles in there. There's some kind of puffy rolls that I do. I've got a whole concept in, taking those kind of triplety phrasings and inserting doubles in them and kind of allowing them to stretch and contract depending upon what the phrasing is so that they don't sound too stiff and kind of gapped, as I would say. And so I don't know, I hope that gives you like a little flavor as to something you could do. There's a whole range of different things that one could pursue. And it depends again on style. If you're in the rock and roll vein, you got to be selective about what you're doing because it's more about the music it's always about the music, no matter what style. But in terms of the choices of your punctuations with your fills, there's the joke about the Pat Boone, Debbie Boone, or you could just have the Debbie Boone or Boone, Debbie Boone, Bat Dooba Boop, or as I used to say, the Joe Pepitone. And so what is that? That is, boom, that kind of a phrase, man, is sometimes the right thing. There's a tune, man. I can't remember the title of the tune now. What is it called? Undercover Angel. I don't remember the artist now. And there are so many of those fills in there. It's like every fill is that fill of dot dagado. And you go, well, geez, that guy had no creativity. No, it was the perfect exclamation point for the song. It's not about the drummer standing out and being this invasive guy. It's the melody and the lyric and the delivery, the emotional value of what's going on with the lyric and the vocal that puts it forward, you know? So again, all context, you know, when you're working on getting to be more free in your playing, that's for your own liberation as a student of the art. When you contribute as a musician to the ensemble, you have a role to play. You're not dominating the conversation. You're part of the conversation. And sometimes that conversation might just be once in a while, yeah, I know what you mean, you know, instead of trying to like dominate with a bunch of thoughts. So anyway, I hope I'm making a point here. And I just wanted to, you know, say like those lanes of whether it's using Gary Chaffee or how I construct things for the down and upstroke values of paradiddles, those can be brought forward into like the literature that I use out of the contemporary percussionist. The phrasing ideas or phrasing concepts grabbed from Ted Reed or from the Louis Bellson book, those are just important values to know, you know, what you can do in certain settings, you know. Great guys who have that command of like, you know, the triplet to the 16th note. Like just think of Stuart Copeland and the Police, how he had that ability to kind of goof around with the time and how he played. Masterful. Okay, and that's just a little bit of a straighter setting. We go to like, you know, like the jazz phenoms. We go to like Elvin and Tony or Jack DeJohnette, or go modern guys, or let's say a little bit more in what I consider modern, like a Bill Stewart or a Brian Blade. Those guys, man, masterful control with what they're doing rhythmically. It's like a horn player. When a horn player plays, they're not just going, well, that's one note. And they're staying just on eighth notes. Now they're going, you know, just making shit up. Actually, I was kind of hearing a tune. If you don't know this record, check it out. It's the Becker Brothers, Heavy Metal Bebop. I just put it on the other day. I hadn't heard it in some time. And Terry Bozzio plays drums on it. And there's a tune called Inside Out. And it's a bluesy shuffle, but it's more of a rock shuffle. So it's not the, you know, like a Freddie King thing. And man, Terry kills it. He's got so much of his Tony Williams stuff coming out in there. It's just so burning. And I remember when I got that record, how my head blew up listening to that guy and going like, oh my God, you know, what is that? So anyway, if you get a chance, I mean, for me, it's just like so one of those things that was important to my youth and growing up and listening to that record. And it holds up. I mean, Randy and Michael just sound phenomenal on it. They're just killing. Yeah, great album. Vic. Hey, Vic. Vic's got it. He knows. Yeah. And so, you know, you're always needing to supplement your listening to really put forward, you know, like grabbing little nuances of dialect and little ideas and subtleties that maybe you didn't hear before as you go on your path. You know, I've had a lot of people who've studied with me say, man, my ear's just more in tune. I hear things better. I think Tony Arco, if you're listening, Tony would have said that. Tony's a former student of mine in Italy. If you haven't seen him play, he's a burner. He's just ridiculous, you know? And he really, I think he just grew immensely as the time that I spent with him, which was about over a 6-year period or so. So those, again, being attentive to the detail, hearing those things, and then being clever with your phrasing. One other thing I would say about, you know, phrasing builders is in my book, the third section, the riddles, you know, I've got puzzles, rhymes, and riddles. Well, the riddles is getting accustomed to playing a 5 over a 3 and a 3 over 5. And it's not a quintuplet and it's not a triplet. It's groups of. So they're all laid out in 16th notes. It's all in 4/4, but it's getting accustomed to being able to hear the 5-note grouping. And the way I define that would be the first and third partial of 5/16 notes. And those 16th notes, again, would be played over the bar line. So if I just play the accent of that, and I'll fill in here and I'll count everything out, it would be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and 1 E, a 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and a 1 and 2. So the threes would be 1 E and a 2 E and 2 E and 4 E and a 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and etc. And what I did is I overlaid these things, and then I did some more drum set-esque presentations of them. My chops are probably not up for the challenge right now because I haven't looked at it in quite some time. When I was writing the book, I was inside everything. But it would take me a moment to just sort of get my bearings straight and kind of get my balance together to put that together. But if you want a remarkable challenge, and there's other things that I could put in, I kind of let it flat. What do I mean? Ted Reed syncopation is flat. Everybody in terms of the teaching world, educators, have added a great deal of color and detail and little lines of what you can do with Ted Reed syncopation. So in my book, it's kind of how I laid it out. I've got some coloring pens that would give you some ideas to think forward with and to put into perspective of those patterns to add to a larger understanding and potentially usage. There are some great usage in there. I always say, man, you don't need to be a super chop buster guy. What you want to have is what I say, rhythmic cleverness, being clever with your rhythms. So, like one of my students were working on some stuff out of the Gary Chester book. And at some point I said, okay, enough with the paper. Take it and take some of those ideas and start to thread and move it around. And don't stay static with the one pattern. Bring it to another pattern, but you go back to that. In other words, you got a home base. You can jump off that platform and come back to it. And I would give them like examples of like, Donnie, do this. Just go like, dat, gon't, gat, get don't gon't, gat, get, gat, get don't gon't, bat, do, dat, didn't do, zabat, dabat, didn't did it, dat, bat, but do, bat, get, gat, don't, gat, don't, gat, gat. Don't go to get good go da bat dat do do da ba ba do do ba and be able to know how that's dancing inside that thing that we want to get into. So anyway, those are concepts. I know that's like not giving you a lick and going like, hey, here's lick number 32. But in the greater scheme of things, what I try to promote in my teaching and how I build things is to build up an interpersonal bag of tricks of licks, things that are like resonate well with you. And like I said before, if I played a lick from somebody else, I could probably orchestrate it well and it would be clean and it would be right. But if I didn't feel it here, I felt self-conscious about it and it felt insincere. So, and sometimes it takes you a while to build up that relationship of power to own up to what you do and don't think it's less than. You're inundated with competition of a whole bunch of stuff in your perceived mind. You might think, oh my God, that guy's doing that, I got to be able to do that, and that guy did that. Like, no. Stand back and enjoy and applaud. Be enthusiastic about it, but let the enthusiasm from that or seeing something that somebody did be the gasoline that you put in your engine to go forward and go like, you know what? I've got that thing. I'm going to test my thing and move it around and see how well it works. And then, continue that process. You keep building. It never stops. That's what the joy of this being involved with this instrument is for me. I mean, it's so just fulfilling to have drumsticks and to be able to teach. That's the greatest thrill of my life at this age, is to be able to throw back and take all the little nuance of what was gifted to me, so to speak, and then all the playing time that I put in to develop it and bring it back and go like here. And most of my students are in the 50s and 60s range. So they're looking at, maybe they're feeling like a little fatigue of that, geez, my arm doesn't work like it used to. I'm just trying to add the sensibility of, hey, there's a better way, the path of least resistance, and maybe we can extend your expiration date, so to speak. So you're not going like, I just can't play anymore. I hate to hear that when somebody puts down sticks. I sort of doesn't sit well in my head. Anyway, Jeffrey, come back in here. Are there any other questions or anything, or any thoughts, or did you have anything to add to the conversation? Or
well, I mean, as someone who studied with you, I can tell you that's true. And we had that comment earlier by Unicorn about the traditional match, and we spent years moving me from 30 years of match grip or traditional grip to match grip after some. It's not an easy thing, but I mean that's the thing. Like it does happen. As you say, you just got to sit down and do it. But I found all the phrasing that we worked on was absolutely instrumental in me finding that contact and me understanding where my mind and my body was working. So and I'm still working on it today, but I'm seeing improvement. It takes time. Everybody's different. But no, that's great. As far as we kept up on most of the comments, we'll see, but I just want to drop some friends because Cassie does drop in quite a bit.
Right, man. Thank you.
And I saw that, I don't know, is it Stephen or Stefan dropped in?
Hey, Stephen. Stephen is a newer student of mine. He's in the Midwest there in like sort of Indiana-ish.
Oh,
yeah.
He's kind of near me. That's not too far from me. And
no, that's right.
I had a conversation in the background with Forte because you introduced me to the 5AW Hickory, but he went on to say he's talking about the double glazed more than anything. I thought the double glazed was a deal breaker.
It is, man. I mean, that tackiness of the active finish,
incredible.
When I had my old 55As in my hand, because I played a little beefier of a stick, or the SD10 swingers, which I loved for playing light because the resonation of that maple and the interaction and stuff with the cymbal was such a great tone, man. These just sit. I mean, as we've gotten, or at least as I've gotten older, I get the drier hands. So, hand lotion and stuff like that is part of the dietary consumption. My wife's always saying, did you put that hand lotion on? But these never feel like slick in the hand. They feel super tacky. And that connectivity is ultimately so important because, this is an extension of your hand. This is what you're doing.
First thing I thought of was the connectivity was incredible as soon as I got that. I was always, so my studio is downstairs and I'm in a cold climate. You've got heat on, everything's drying you out all the time. Either your hands are cold or they're just dry. That's right. So getting that slight little contact sticky, it's not sticky, but it just feels secure. If that makes sense. I love that. I was so happy when you turned me on to those. I'm like, I'm never going back to.
Well, my student David threw these in my hand about, was it 5 years ago? And he said, hey, have you tried these? And I went, no, I haven't seen those. And once he handed me a pair of those, I never looked back.
I bet.
So my general order now for Vic Firth is always these. So.
Vihar sent out some love. Bruce, you're among the best of the best. Thank you. It's wonderful. We saw some great things, and I had put up. I did sneak in your book there on puzzles, a link there, and
great.
Victor is a fan. And then we do have a question here, a follow up from Tony. Do you sing your phrasing like in a 12 bar or 32 bar tune? If so,
sure.
Demonstrate?
If I'm doing something like. Some things that I would think of like, so not a 32 bar, I'll sing a 36 bar tune. I do all the things you are. Where if I was playing, I'm thinking of. But as I'm singing that and playing against it, if I was just a solo, I wouldn't be so square with the melody. I'd be going. Ba ga ga ba di da ba ba biddly diddly ba boo boo doo doo ba da da do da ya da di da boo doo and do blatten do blatten do blatten do blatten do blatten do ba biddy ba zuba da do ba do ba do hey to the bridge da da do ba and I'd be thinking of like that melody and kind of playing around with it, stretching it out. But and for blues, I just hear the blues, but I like to hear something melody wise, So, if you're playing a blues, you got the melody. So, my brother wrote some really cool 12 bar blues tunes. That last one, I'm trying to think of the last one because he's written a few through the years. So, and we haven't really worked together in a number of years. So, what's that one that it's called Blues for Brother Brew. It's actually a tune on a duo record he did with his guitar mentor and friend Joe DiOrio, who in some circles of the guitar world is a big figure, like for guys like Pat Metheny and stuff like that.
Is this like a version of drum karaoke? That's funny.
Yeah,
It's funny, in a way. It's kind of. Do you find it drummers are resistant to using that kind of sing along for phrasing at first?
Yeah, because everybody gets self-conscious about it, but then also I think the lack of freedom already kind of buttons you up. You feel like, well, I can't sing that. I don't know what to do. I remember Mark Schulman when we were kids. He was always singing his funk patterns. He was like, doing that, and I'd kind of laugh. But at the same time, I was always thinking like, dude, just hearing that thing. And if it sits in your head long enough, it's like, God damn it, man, I got to get it out. You just kind of sing it and play it.
It's rough. It's ruminating in my head. I got to purge.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Here's a guy who's Drumeo course alum. Great. And you picked all the things you're learning it right now. Great. That's a great standard because of the fact that it's 36 bars. Mm-hmm. There's other tunes that I like standards. I didn't go super deep into like learning a lot of tunes in terms of the jazz vein. I learned the tunes that my peers were playing around me. So, like There'll Never Be Another You, or I used to love to play The Days of Wine and Roses because that was an early pick in the David Becker Tribune.
Right.
Or, I don't know, man. My head goes a little blank. There's more modern things that we would play too, of like with my friend Brad, this great guitar player, Brad Rabuchin, and we would play like he would just take a Schofield record and he made charts of the cool tunes that he wanted to play, and we'd play those, or we'd play, it's a Don Grolnick tune on Michael Brecker's solo record. It's called Nothing Personal, and those kind of things. Those things, then I'd listen and I'd really know what I was doing or try. I remember working with a pianist in Holland when I lived over in Belgium, and he was a Bill Evans freak. So he really got me into listening to Bill Evans, and Bill does great standards like Nardis, and again, Waltz for Debbie. I can't think of all the great tunes right now off my head, but fantastic stuff. And it empowers you to know what's going on inside the tune melodically.
Well, what would you say though to those who aren't, they're not traditionally a blues, jazz, aficionados, and they're saying, well, I'm playing contemporary rock, or I'm playing maybe country. What do you say to people like that who may say, that's not for me? That's not really.
Oh, I got a great comeback. You should be able to sit down and play the drums of a tune without anybody being there and transmit like a radio transmitter that tune. I used to do clinics that I would do that specifically. I would go in and I would play like a full version of like Ticket to Ride by the Beatles, or Come Together, or whatever. I'd pick different tunes. It might even be something different, but I just sit down. I go like, all right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down, boom, boom. There she stood, and just know everything about All Right Now, every nuance.
Yeah.
You can do that with all your tunes. A lot of people get flustered and they go like, well, I can't play if the singer doesn't come in because I don't know where to come in. Yeah, you do with 4 or 8 bars. And if the singer doesn't come in and they make a mistake, have the wherewithal to be improvising and go like, oh, we're playing another 4 bars of intro. I mean, on a gig, right. I play with so many players. And
they never come in when you think they're going to.
Somebody forgot to come in, and you just go like, just one more time, and you do it. It's not a big deal.
We call it landing the plane. This happens at the end of songs too, where you think you're supposed to come in here, and they're like, we're not going to land it yet. We're just gonna. You got to be prepared that we're going back up for another lap.
That's right. That happened a lot, and so I as a leader of like my cover bands when I was a kid with my brothers. That was my job. I felt like this, like, okay, I'm going to end the tune. So we're not sitting here waiting in the wind for an extra, couple of go-arounds till somebody goes, oh, I guess we should end it. It's like, no, look at me. And I do a big drum fill and set it up to get them out. Or on live gigs, in my more recent playing here, sometimes some guy was really jamming and people were kind of going like, is he done yet? And I just go like, I think that's enough solos. Zabba dabba dabba dabba, bingo. We're going back to the chorus or the verse or whatever.
But how many times have you tried? I've tried to end songs. Everybody's there, but a person, and you end up going, all right, I guess you find your way to not, because
Sure.
you could be completely right, but people are going to think you're wrong. As a drummer, you're really exposed in those situations because you're the one who's going to look like you're wrong, even right you are. So you got to be willing to move along. It's an interesting thought.
I would commit, but also be flexible on that commitment. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. If there was something where you were really just convinced that it's time to move on, I do a 1, 2, 3. Just do like the.
You get better at that as you get as you get experience. You get better at being very. And of course, as a band, if you play together more, it's a little bit easier to have that conversation with the eyes and the feel.
Well, and those things happen less when you have a band because you know a little bit more. But a lot of those gigs that I used to do were like you showed up and you played with those people maybe once or twice a month, and when I had my version of a cover band, we just called it Bruce Becker and Friends. It was fun because I'd email out and go like, all right, guys, let's learn that Blue Oyster Cult tune, Burning for You. And, or let's do the Cars. What's that tune? It's an orangey sky. I can't think of the title of the tune. And we would just get together and there would be a quick run through of like, all right, so what are you singing on that? Oh, you're singing that? Okay, great. And we just do it, and there was never any train wrecks with that band. Oh, maybe one small subtlety here or there that you really couldn't hear. We could.
Just hiccups, a little here, there.
Yeah, just little
internal hiccups, you know what I mean?
But, we got great tunes and we always had great feedback. I'd sometimes sit and watch and go, geez, people aren't really, they're like mesmerized. What's going on? And then you come out on the break and people go like, you're the greatest. I've never heard those tunes before. Cause we try to play tunes that you wouldn't necessarily hear along with the usual suspects of hits that you must do.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to, Cassie apparently is jumping into your 26-week Drumeo course.
You're doing the Drumeo course. Excellent. Great.
So that's kind of cool.
That's a good one. That's good. It was, good. I believe you're right.
And Tony says, I believe you're right, Bruce. You become more of a musician, not just a drummer, by knowing all the tune. I totally agree with that. I think you have more to say if you know what you're.
Yeah, man. You can't. Every minute that you're growing and moving forward, gives you the opportunity to seize a little bit more of that digging deep. Like the guys that I worked with, man, they're guys that they knew like every nuance of all these different tunes, man. And so that's how I was as a kid. I kind of retained that. And when I got into something, I wanted to really know like every little subtlety of it.
Yeah.
And like I said, to be able to sit down and play a tune, it should be not a requirement that there's a band there. It should be, hey man, I am playing that tune. That's what you're doing. You're playing it. Just like a solo guitar. One of the greatest gig experiences I had for many years, my friend Yvonne Perea. And if you don't know Yvonne, she's not a huge name, but she's out there in Texas burning it up and playing. And she's got, 4 or 5 records out. I think I recorded on about 3 of them, not every single track, but a bunch. The last record she did is great. It's called Lucky Me. And we played tons of cover gigs. When we would play those, we got an opportunity. This guy that used to book us at this one club had this idea because he would always hire a solo act. And I got Yvonne in there to do a solo act. And at one point he goes, think you guys could do a duo? And I'm like, sure, why not? It didn't faze me at all. And we had people coming up to us, like some reputable musicians of name that we would know, that would come up to us and go like, God, you guys sound like a band. But that's how we played it. I was playing as if there was a bass player and as if there was a lead guitar player. And if there was a simple lead guitar playing lick, I'd sing it. If there was like some tag phrase that needed to be in there, I'd just sing it, or Yvonne would sing it.
I did it a lot with Cajon. So I would go in a lot of these clubs with just a guitar guy, singer-songwriter. And he's like, just come on, let's play. And you do that. You start singing the other parts and try to, allude to them. And then people walk off and they're like, sounds like 4 people. And that's the best compliment you can get.
Absolutely.
And they're like, oh, it sounds like a full band or a full. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful that you're saying that's a really wonderful compliment.
If you know this drummer, he's been around for a long time. Matt Logg. He does a lot of different things. He's played with, what's his name? Slash. And he's done, other things. And I think currently has a band with Mike Campbell formerly of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, because there is no more Tom Petty.
Right.
And He recorded, I think, on the Alanis Morissette record. He's done a lot of different things. Anyway, I think we were in sort of a same sphere for a minute of subbing. He might have subbed for me on the Yvonne gig, and he just happened to be at the club, and we were inside, and he came up to us and kind of stared at us, and I kind of thought, well, are we sucking? Is something wrong? And we finished the tune, and he went, "You guys sound incredible. You sound like a band." And that was one of those, like poignant moments where you go, "Wow, great. I'm glad to be able to bring it forward."
There's something,
and somebody's listening and paying attention even more than the case.
Well, there's that, but there's something to be said about somebody feeling like you're doing something more than just two guys, knocking out. Like you're really, I don't know, you're cultivating something bigger than. I had a thought there, but it's just something bigger than what you come on with. I don't know. There's a great compliment in that, and it's hard to explain, but I really enjoy that, and it is true, Tony, that the cajon does work really well with that, because sometimes these venues are like, hey, don't bring a drum set in. So, right. but you can really do this. I do the same thing that what Bruce is talking about here is exactly what I did, although I didn't realize that. I'm just singing the parts and trying to fill musically in something around what I'm doing. And I think that's a great way to build. I don't know if I can take it as well to the kit as I could percussion, because that's kind of my forte, but I think it's true. And I think it's something that I need to try to use more and more. So, yeah,
but I think, like I said, there's in the rock world just as much of a responsibility to sit down and be able to play that tune and hear it in your head, and not get lost, and not be so dependent upon. Now, when you're playing with a band, there are arrangement considerations. So again, you got to be flexible with that.
Yeah.
And but if you know the core tune, then a little improv here, extending a solo or extending an intro or doubling a bridge or whatever the case may be, no harm, no foul there. That's just having good conversation skills. Like when you get into a conversation and maybe you have a point to bring and you're like trying to really just stay with that point, but somebody added something to the texture of the conversation and kind of pulled it over here. And that's really cool because that part of the conversation is going to a great place. Don't go, no, you can't go there because I wanted to say this. You go with the flow.
Yeah, you could tell.
And if you can
when they're
back, you do.
Yeah, you get good at understanding, resolving. Are they resolving their thought here or not musically? Which is the conversation, right? Are they ending the conversation? Resolve your thought. That's a little bit of musical direction, and that's exactly musical discretion is what Victor's saying. Yeah, I love that thought. I love that discussion. Yeah. I think we're caught up on our friends here, but
we are.
So is there anything else you want to add, or should we?
No, that's pretty much it. I just say, we were talking about being a little bit more on top of this. I will say this, that in terms of some phrasing ideas that I spoke today, I won't, I don't have a title for it yet, but I do have an up and coming book that is just about finished.
It's exciting.
And that book will be some building blocks that I use, a few, not everything, because there's my slant of my book has a certain direction. So I needed to keep within the certain lines of that. So I didn't get too scattered, smothered, and covered. So look for that. And that will be certainly announced through, these mediums that we are now so entrenched in, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Don't really know what TikTok is, but
TikTok. Well, yeah.
I don't think
get on it. We're gonna have to get on it, I guess.
I got it. We got to start one that we just call Flam Tap or something like that. Hey, here's Flam Tap.
Let's do it.
Hell, it's Flam Tap. Everybody just doing different Flam Taps all day long.
Sadly, but anyway, you probably get 1 million views. Probably.
Yeah, probably. So anyway, keep your eyes open for that, and then we'll probably try to stay a little bit more on a regular stream. I will be announcing at some great Hank. Thank you, Tony. And I will probably do a masterclass coming up. We haven't picked a date yet, but look for that in perhaps the beginning of the second quarter of this year. And that'll be good. Those are always fun to get a little deeper into the minutia because I have, a panel of people that I'm working with, and there's, PDFs, and then Jeffrey's always responsible about, making sure the PDFs are in that place where they are, where they rest, and having the content of the video available, post the masterclass and all that stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Yep. And hopefully by the time we reboot and do something like that, maybe in the summer it'll be time for a real live masterclass here in sunny Southern California.
Let's go universe.
That's right.
It's get there. We'll get there. So,
all right, everybody.
Well, great
Peace.
hang.
Thanks
I
for
appreciate
hanging
it.
with us. Look forward to seeing you the next time.
I appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next time. And yeah, Bruce, I'll see you on the other side.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk to you soon. All right.